Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I have the great honor to open the 12th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Before taking up the agenda today, I'd like to warmly welcome the presence of His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, let's move to our agenda. May I now take it that the conference adopts draft agenda for its 12th session and proceed to the first agenda item. It is decided. I now declare the 12th session open. Now, I move on to the agenda item 2 of the provisional agenda, election of the President and other officers of the conference. After consultations among all regional groups, the state parties nominated the Bureau-elect of the Conference of the State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities for the 12th and 13th sessions. The Bureau-elect consists of Ecuador as the President-elect, and Finland and Hungary, Liberia, and Singapore as the Vice President-elect. May I take it that it is the wish of the conference to elect Republic of Ecuador as the President of the conference by acclamation? It is so decided. May I also take it that it is the wish of the conference that it elects Finland, Hungary, Liberia, and Singapore as the Vice Presidents by acclamation? Congratulations to the new membership of the Bureau of the Conference. It is my honor now to invite His Excellency Ambassador Luis Gallegos of the Republic of Ecuador to assume the presidency of the conference. Ambassador, you are.
Señoras y señores,
ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, First Lady of Ecuador, very good morning to all of you. It is indeed an honor for the Republic of Ecuador to be the president of the Conference of States Parties, and on behalf of the Vice Presidents, Finland, Hungary, Liberia, and Singapore, I wish to express our profound appreciation for your confidence in us to take up these important positions. We shall now proceed to the organization of work, which is item 4 of the provisional agenda. The first item shall be NGO accreditation and registration. A list of non-governmental organizations requesting accreditation was circulated to all states parties on 2 May 2019 in accordance to the rules of procedure of the conference. The Secretariat has not received any requests or notice against these requests. Therefore, it is understood that the list of NGOs' applications for accreditation is approved and may participate in future conferences of states parties as observers. It is so decided. In keeping with past practice, the conference also wishes to welcome participation by national human rights institutions and the Global Alliance for National Human Rights Institutions as observers in this session of the Conference of States Parties.
convention. Es un honor dar la bienvenida a la sesión de apertura.
It is an honor to welcome you to the session of the 12th session of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on Rights of Persons in Disabilities. We are grateful to have you here in this forum, which is one of the greatest ones on the matter of disabilities. We have planned this together with states parties, United Nations systems, non-governmental organizations, to be able to meet and have a dialogue on this common objective, and that is the full implementation of the CRPD, to promote human rights and move towards an inclusive world to include all persons with disabilities. We've gone along the path of almost 75 years to attain the fundamental values in the Charter of the United Nations. We've adopted a number of international instruments on human rights, defending the rights of all and dignity, including those most vulnerable. One of the instruments was the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, adopted on the 13th of December 2006 here in this room, in this hall, with signatures on the 30th of March 2007. There were 82 signatories to the convention. 44 signed the optional protocol, with 1 ratification of the convention. This is the highest number of signatories in the history of human rights conventions in the United Nations. The convention was negotiated over 8 sessions with an ad hoc committee of the General Assembly 2002 to 2006, which also turned it into the Human Rights Treaty negotiated in the shortest period possible. Furthermore, it's the first comprehensive treaty on human rights in the 21st century and the first convention on human rights open to regional organizations for signing. The convention entered into force on the 3rd of May 2008 after decades of work to change attitudes and outlook of persons with disabilities who are the true subjects of these rights, capable of claiming their rights, taking decisions on the basis of free consent and information, being active in society. Now we have 177 states parties to the convention committed to promote rights and inclusion of persons with disability. Today we are inaugurating the 12th Conference of States Parties, which is a great meeting and will offer a new opportunity to reflect on experience and lessons learned over last years, identifying deficiencies to strengthen our policies and improve practices for full implementation of the convention. Today, we welcome more than 1,500 participants from approximately 180 states parties and observers, with about 100 of NGOs and dozens of United Nations entities. Similarly, through digitalization, this session will reach approximately 6 million people, and we would like to greet them all warmly. We also have about 90 parallel events which will be developed jointly with the official program, with a very rich and profound exchange of experience and innovative ideas so that the rights and inclusion of persons with disability can become true. Now measures are being taken for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, with our deliberations and contributions as this Conference of States parties being very significant and important. We have to broaden our efforts for full implementation of the Convention, and at the same time we should pursue development for our people in keeping with the SDGs. Taking all of this into account, from the Bureau of the conference, together with the 4 vice presidents, regional vice president, we decided to inclusion of persons with disabilities in a changing world through implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to be guaranteed. This will take the 3 days with the round tables that we've organized also on the following subjects: technology, digitalization, ICT for empowerment of and inclusion of persons with disabilities, and social inclusion and right to the highest possible level of health inclusion of persons with disability through participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and sports. The 3 round tables will be discussing the cross-cutting issues such as creating awareness. These questions are of high importance in our current environment. They require our attention since they include a number of factors having direct influence on the manner in which our societies will respond to legitimate demands of persons with disabilities. Furthermore, we've organized an interactive dialogue with the United Nations systems and other interested parties. We will have an opportunity to hear key entities in the United Nations and civil society as to their work, initiatives that they are working on to help member states to implement the Convention and promote inclusive development of disability in all priority thematic areas in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The main topic and subtopics that were agreed by the Bureau openly and in a transparent way, consulting all interested parties, including member states, the United Nations systems, civil society, and especially persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. These are all tightly related and are crucial to promote the human rights of persons with disabilities and implementation of the Convention. The success of these overall agreements depends on our commitment for implementation of the Convention and to guarantee that the voice of the more vulnerable and marginalized can be heard and taken into account in all decisions, such as the question of none of us without all of us. We are convinced that we still have a long path to follow. Strengthening inclusion, solidarity, and equality should be our priority, as well as building societies that are free of discrimination without any barriers that limit the enjoyment of rights, especially for persons with disabilities. We are convinced that it is only together that we can attain these objectives, and we are confident that this multilateral forum is the right place to do this. I wish you all success, and I thank you all for your cooperation and the availability to work in this noble cause. I have a personal thought that I would like to share with you. I am Ambassador of Ecuador with the honor and pride to preside over this meeting that drafted this convention. Ecuador has been very active with our President of the Republic, Luis Moreno, and our First Lady, who is here with us today, having worked very hard, making this an example. Disability is something that you can encounter in the middle of your life through illness, accident, war, or any other cause. As we age, however, we will also have disabilities. The billions of people who do not have disabilities will take care of those who do. These people and their family are over 4 billion people, and they all need attention and care, not because they're a minority, but because everybody can be vulnerable to disability. And that is a thought that I would like to see bring on change in our society. It should become part of our life, and we should set this as a priority in all society.
Ahora tengo el honor de
I now invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to deliver a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends, just a few weeks ago, a remarkable young woman came to the United Nations to share her story with the Security Council. Her name was Nujeen Mustafa, a 20-year-old refugee from Aleppo. Nujeen happens to have cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. She movingly described her life as a young woman with a disability in the midst of war, the difficulties, the challenges, and their constant fear that a disability might have caused her family to be seconds too late from fleeing a bombing. Nujeen carried a clear message, as she put it, and I quote, "No one left behind should not just be words that you say. You can and should do more to ensure that people with disabilities are included in all aspects of your work. We can't wait any longer." End of quote. And this was reflected in my most recent report on protection of civilians, which explicitly highlights the situation of persons with disabilities, a first such reference in more than a decade. Nujeen's words also echo in my mind today as we come together for this 12th session of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I want to express my deepest gratitude for all of you to advance the rights of persons with disabilities across the agenda and around the world. Your work is vital, not just for persons with disabilities, but indeed for all people. Disability inclusion is a fundamental human right. And when we fight to secure those rights, we move our world closer to upholding the core values and principles of the United Nations Charter. Disability inclusion is central to the promise of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. And when we remove policies or biases or obstacles to opportunity for persons with disabilities, the whole world benefits. Indeed, the International Labour Organization found that excluding people with disabilities from the world of work can rob countries of as much as 7% of their gross domestic product. Realizing the rights of persons with disabilities is a matter of justice, as well as a common sense investment in our common future. We all know this. The distinguished president of this conference, Ambassador Luis Gallegos of Ecuador, who led the drafting of the convention, knows this. The 177 state parties that have ratified the convention, 9 out of 10 members of the United Nations know this. But we also know something else. We have a long way to go in changing mindsets, laws and policies to ensure the rights, opportunity and dignity for persons with disabilities around the world. So we are here together to take action, to make the goals and the objectives of the Convention a reality on the ground. We are here to promote stronger collaboration among member states, the UN system, civil society organizations, in particular organizations of persons with disabilities, as well as the private sector and academic institutions. And we are here, as the Convention eloquently states, and I quote, to transform society and development to be inclusive, accessible, and sustainable for all. End of quote. Distinguished delegates, dear friends, this is a crucial effort and much work remains. Last December, I issued the first ever UN flagship report on disability and development. And it highlights core challenges: disproportionate levels of poverty, lack of access to education, health services, employment, and the underrepresentation of persons with disabilities in decision-making and political participation. We must do much more to address discrimination and exclusion, particularly against girls and women with disabilities. And we must do much more to ensure full accessibility to schools, healthcare and services, the workplace, leisure and recreational activities, sports, and all areas of life. We must also do much more on transportation, infrastructure, and information and communications technology to make our cities, rural areas, and societies inclusive. Our destination is clear: a world in which all persons, including those with disabilities, can enjoy equal opportunities, have a full say in decision-making processes, and truly benefit from economic, social, political, and cultural life. I urge all actors, particularly state parties to the Convention and their international partners, to be more ambitious in implementing their commitments to ensure the realization of the rights of all persons with disabilities. Distinguished delegates, dear friends, in all these efforts, the United Nations must lead by example. Early in my tenure, I commissioned a comprehensive review of our performance on disability inclusion. I will be frank, it's not a pretty picture. Yes, we have some examples of good practices, but the review shed light on gaps, big gaps, across all our work from headquarters to the country level. The report revealed a lack of understanding and systemic approaches to ensure we fulfill our responsibilities. It showed unevenness in our approach, in our use of existing tools and mechanisms, in not only our strategies, but even in awareness of core policies. I believe in confronting these challenges head-on. And that is why today I'm announcing the launch of the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy. It is not a strategy of words, it's a strategy of action. Action to raise the standards of the UN's performance on disability inclusion across the board, and action to bring about the unified and transformative change we need. I have insisted on an accountability framework to monitor progress and to make sure we address the challenges and gaps, not only in headquarters, but in the field. And we have established clear benchmarks and a focus on critical areas including leadership, strategic planning, accessibility, participation, programming, procurement, and the call for more persons with disabilities working in the United Nations and better supported by the organization. I want the United Nations to be an employer of choice for persons with disabilities. And I want our humanitarian, development and peace operations to fully recognize and advance the rights of persons with disabilities. And I want the United Nations to be fully accessible for one and all. It is very simple. We can no longer be a platform for change when persons with disabilities cannot access that platform to speak. I count on the strong support of Member States as we move this strategy forward. And I count especially on persons with disabilities and their organizations to ensure that the entire UN family makes good on the promise of this strategy. Together, we can raise awareness to remove barriers. Together with persons with disabilities as agents of change, we can build an inclusive, accessible and sustainable world. And together we can create the conditions to realize the simple dream that young Nujin Mustafa shared with the Security Council. My hope, she said, and I quote, is that people with disabilities, particularly women and girls, one day live in a world that protects, respects, and values us. End of quote. Distinguished delegates and dear friends, every person should expect nothing less. It's our duty to deliver. Thank you.
Agradezco al señor.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement, and for his very profound thoughts. I now invite Mr. Monitan Bhutan, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to deliver his statement.
Mr. Secretary General, Minister, President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, colleagues, it is a great honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As Mr. Dalami Basharu, Chair of the Committee, could unfortunately not be with us for reasons beyond his control. I thank the Bureau for reiterating its invitation to the committee to participate in opening of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The priority theme of this year's conference is ensuring inclusion of persons with disabilities in a changing world through the implementation of the CRPD. Yes, we live in a changing world and always have. However, despite changing world, or perhaps I should say precisely, because changing world, the centrality of human rights in people's lives has never been more fundamental. Moreover, the centrality of human rights for persons with disabilities as rights holders, as equal participants in society, as human rights defenders, as women, men, children, including in all spheres of life, are part of this changing world, and more importantly, changing the world. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, when implemented, ensures that persons with disability themselves are at the forefront of contributing to changing the world in the right direction. I would like to highlight examples of concerted action, including by persons with disabilities, which have led to recent changes. First, ahead of the CRPD elections last year, the committee issued an open letter of concern to state parties to ensure that more women experts would join the committee. Many organizations of persons with disabilities and coalition also develop a consistent messaging campaign to raise awareness about the pressing need to achieve gender parity in the committee. Although gender parity was not attained, I am pleased that 6 women have joined the committee and as a result of the 2018 election. Equality between men and women is one of the principles of the Convention, which applies to all provisions and which guides the committee's work. Ensuring inclusion of persons with disabilities through implementation of the Convention specifically requires that all actors at all levels engage in the development, advancement, empowerment of women and girls with disabilities. Initiatives by many of my fellow participants in this conference of the state parties, including my peers at the panel this morning, as well as the advocacy efforts undertaken in this same forum, have contributed to the growing recognition within the United Nations system that needs to do more and better for persons with disabilities. Mr. Secretary General, I commend your commitment to ensure accessibility and mainstreaming of the rights of persons with disabilities through the United Nations Disabilities Inclusion Strategy. Consciously adopting systematic approach to the rights of persons with disabilities across all operation of programs of the United Nations system, and ensuring that we, persons with disabilities, can participate on an equal basis with others is sure to change the world by leading by examples and hopefully including the seating arrangement for today's conference. Persons with disabilities still face Persons with disabilities still face barriers to participate in society. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, however, has a huge potential to contribute to changing attitudes about disabilities, changing environment, changing lives, and in short, changing the world. Today, there are 178 countries that have ratified or acceded to the Convention. September last year, the committee adopted its General Comment number 7, entitled Participation of Persons with Disabilities, including Children with Disabilities, in the implementation and monitoring of the Convention. The message of the General Comment is clear. The effective and meaningful participation of persons with disabilities through their representative organizations is at the heart of the Convention. The active and informed participation of everyone in decisions that affect their lives and rights is consistent with the human rights-based approach in public decision-making processes and ensures good governance and social accountability. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, finally, I must once again raise the issues of financial resources. I am very concerned that despite repeated calls made upon the Secretary General and the previous Bureau of Conference of State Parties by my predecessors in this same space, the issue of financial resources to fund the travel of representatives of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to the Conference of State Parties has not been resolved. After having funded the travel of the chair and sometimes vice chair for many years in an ad hoc manner. For the first time, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights was unable to cover this traveling cost. This year, the Korean Human Rights Commission generously contributed to the travel of Mr. Basharu, chair of the committee. However, as you all appreciate, this is an unsustainable solution, and I reiterate my call for serious consideration to the United Nations, in particular to the Secretariat of the Conference of State Parties at UNDISA, to kindly include the travel of the chair of the committee to Conference of State Parties. I must also raise the concern which Mr. Chairperson of the committee, together with other chairpersons of the United Nations human rights treaty bodies, about cash flow difficulties at the United Nations announced to us in April 2019. In practice, this would mean the cancellation of sessions for 6 of the 10 treaty bodies due to financial reasons, resulting in numerous negative consequences, including seriously undermining the system of protection which the member states themselves have put in place over decades. Together with the chairpersons of 10 treaty bodies, we have addressed a letter to you, Mr. Secretary General, as we are deeply concerned about the practical consequences of canceling these sessions, requesting that you, together with member states, find ways of addressing the situation as the matter of urgency. Finally, I'd like to reiterate the motto to promote and protect the rights to participate by all persons with disabilities, especially through representative organizations. Nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Many thanks indeed to Mr. Monhan Bhutan for that statement. I now wish to invite Ms. Catalina de Vandas, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to deliver a statement.
Voy a pedir a los señores
I would ask the people delivering statements to not speak any longer than for 5 minutes on each of the agenda items. Secretary General, President, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to begin by thanking the Bureau for their invitation to participate once again at the opening session of this conference. As the central issue reminds us, the world is changing, and is changing quickly. Afoot are environmental crises, demographic changes, scientific and technological innovations, political, economical, and social transformations. These are all changes which, in many cases, disproportionately affect persons with disabilities. This proliferation of agendas and priorities that are constantly changing compels us to move out of our comfort zone and to broach the rights of all people and also people with disabilities from broader platforms. The agenda on the rights of persons with disabilities cannot be contemplated on the margins of debates on the major challenges affecting humankind. As the Convention recalls, the enjoyment of our individual rights is inextricably linked to our realities and to that of our communities. In this vein, the adoption of Agenda 2030 gave us every reason to hope. The idea of not leaving anyone behind is one embodied by the Sustainable Development Agenda, and that is an agenda which tackles major global challenges. The agenda provides us with a framework of indicators to improve the lives of all, including persons with disabilities. For persons with disabilities, we are empowered thanks to the Convention, and as a group we've worked arduously to be a part of this agenda for development. Nevertheless, the progress made to date is insufficient, and persons with disabilities continue to lag behind and are often an afterthought of states' priorities, and indeed an afterthought of the international community, including in this House, as we see today and as the Secretary-General has acknowledged. Delegates, the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy, announced by the Secretary-General and recently adopted, provides an operational framework, as was recalled, and indeed a framework for monitoring and follow-up by the United Nations as a whole. It provides a framework to monitor agencies' funds and programs, to ensure that this House, this organisation, can ensure the inclusion of persons with disabilities in all of their endeavours, be these in the sphere of development, human rights, humanitarian aid, or peace and security. As I said 1 year ago in this very House, the strategy is an ambitious proposal and significant in scope, and can constitute a turning point for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in each and every pillar of the United Nations work. I wish to publicly acknowledge the work of the Secretary-General and thank him for this, a major achievement of his mandate. I wish to acknowledge his leadership and his commitment throughout the process, which has led to the adoption of UNDIS. I also wish to hail the appointment of the Senior Advisor on Policy, Ms. Ana Maria Menendez, to lead, guide and support the coordination of the implementation of UNDIS for this first year of its existence. Nevertheless, I wish to issue a warning. The adoption of this strategy is simply a starting point of a long process to make this organisation a genuine strategic ally for anyone living with a disability. Significant strides forward have yet to be made if we are to lay down proper foundations for and to ensure the full inclusion of persons with disabilities in all the pillars of the work of the organisation. And incidentally, significant steps forward must be made if we are to ensure the recently adopted strategy lasts. I wish to issue an appeal to states to politically and financially support the implementation of this strategy. It's a positive form of investment. Strengthening the capacities of the United Nations system will allow us to afford greater support to national efforts to ensure that persons with disabilities can enjoy their rights on the ground. Finally, I wish to reiterate the importance of ensuring that we consult with and guarantee the active participation of persons with disabilities as we implement the UN Disability Strategy. Social gains are only made when there are persons fighting and spearheading the fights for their own rights. The tireless struggle of persons with disabilities is the struggle which allows us to be here today as persons with disabilities and have a greater degree of visibility on the international stage. It is only working together as states, the international community, the United Nations and persons with disability that we will be able to enjoy all of our rights in this ever-changing world. Nothing can be done without persons with disabilities. Many thanks.
Agradezco a usted por
I thank you for your statement. Now I invite Maria Soledad Cisterna Reyes, Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, to deliver a statement.
Muy buenos días.
A very good morning to each and every one of you. Particular greetings to the Secretary General of the United Nations. Thank you for having placed your trust in this woman with a disability to be the Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility. I also wish to extend particular greetings to Ambassador Luis Gallegos. For years, he has worked for the rights of persons with disabilities. I also wish to greet delegations of states, parties, colleagues of civil society, friends, all. First of all, listening to the words of the representative of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, I indeed sat on that committee for 8 years. Listening to their remarks, I can only lend my full support to all the words spoken by its representative regarding strengthening treaty bodies when it comes to their functioning. As far as I am concerned, and the message I wish to deliver, I wish to say that for many years I devoted my professional endeavours to the rights of persons with disabilities. And I believe profoundly that accessibility is the iconic cross-cutting pillar that will ensure human rights of persons with disabilities are enjoyed in the 21st century. Accessibility is an umbrella legal concept which encompasses other concepts not referred to in all conventions, for example, the rights of the rights of children, other rights. But only accessibility can be is legally recognised in the CRPD, and it is for this reason that in Agenda 2030 on Sustainable Development, this concept is explicitly referred to in Section 11. Here we are reminded about the need to have resilient, sustainable cities, and 2 targets contained in this section specifically refer to accessibility and the need to ensure that the accessibility of transport and green areas in towns. But think about the fact that all of this is linked to sustainable development, and we need to look, therefore, at the monitoring mechanism for sustainable development provided for in the Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is the HLPF. You should remember that more than 100 countries have presented their national reviews to the high-level political forum. Last year, 47 states parties did just that. Of that number, only 17 referred to accessibility. And this constitutes 34.78% of state reports submitted. This is a clear reflection of the fact that as far as sustainable development is concerned, and through the HLPF, and here I issue an appeal to the HLPF, to work further on oversight when it comes to ensuring universal accessibility is enjoyed by all. We must bear in mind that accessibility as a fundamental pillar of rights should be present across the board in all SDGs when we ensure that we fulfill them. This prompts us to think about smart cities, technologically minded cities that we all talk about today. However, this technology involved in smart cities must be fully accessible and must be adapted to users' needs so that the digital gap can be closed. We, as disabled people, don't want more barriers. When we talk about accessibility, we're talking about rights, not favours. And consequently, when a smart city provides for accessibility and ensures capacity building for disabled people, only then will it be a smart city. Otherwise, this smart city will not be smart if it leaves persons with disabilities behind. In this vein, I wish to underscore the initiative undertaken by several entities devoted to technological development led by World Enabled. These organizations are working arduously to spearhead the initiative Cities for All and ensure its success. These Cities for All are cities which have these cities for all, are now numerous, and they've committed to universal accessibility. I invite states parties, municipal authorities and civil societies to look at this initiative of Cities for All and to adhere to it. Together we can achieve the goal of accessibility. Let us not forget that the lack of accessibility contributes to poverty and is multidimensional, and that runs counter to SDGs 1. It's also a form of structural mistreatment which we cannot allow to continue in the 21st century. And what is the role to be played by businesses in this regard? Bearing in mind the Universal Declaration on Businesses and Human Rights, that declaration says that businesses need to implement internal policies which provide for and consider human rights issues and sustainable development issues such as accessibility. These are all political declarations which compel us to think further about the rights of persons with disabilities. SDG 2 talks about sustainable patterns of production and consumption, and here accessibility can also feed in. There needs to be accessible production. I also issue an appeal to businesses in this regard to contribute by being leaders of sustainable development. And what does that mean? It means that they need to invest in communities and precisely focusing these investments on accessibility. That's genuine leadership for development, and that will produce a yield for businesses because they'll have workers happy to work because they have well-being, and this in line with SDG number 3. Now, I wish to also say that this Conference of States Parties is and wields authority. It's a conventional mechanism which can insist, reiterate and underscore concepts before the HLPF. It can come before the HLPF and insist upon the fact that this monitoring mechanism is important. That is the monitoring mechanism for accessibility, and all of this is connected to human diversity and has an impact on management and planning that ensures the full and inclusive participation of everyone, particularly in the development of cities and human settlements. As has been said, we also need to ensure accessibility within the United Nations. I wish to conclude by referring to the 3 issues which will be examined throughout this Conference on States Parties. There's health, access to sports, culture, recreation and technology. And if you look at the agenda, all of these issues have a guiding thread in common, a premise in common, and that is upholding accessibility and guaranteeing it for all. And I would give you an example of accessibility before I close. Think about the fact that in September we will have a summit on universal healthcare coverage. The draft, and that is the fruit, will be the outcome document of this summit, mentions on a number of occasions persons with disabilities, but look at the fact that nowhere is reference made to the cross-cutting issue of accessibility. And I say this and say this again, and I say it unequivocally and emphatically, accessibility must be elevated to a key principle of universal healthcare coverage. It must have that status. The same status must be given to regional reasonable adjustments, healthcare provision. If we lend that status to these concepts, we will ensure that there is quality healthcare to all, provided to all, and that no one is left behind. And that is the very raison d'être of Agenda 2030. I would conclude by saying that this mandate firmly supports the issue of accessibility, and I say this in the presence of our Secretary General. You can count on my mandate to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. These are my opening remarks, and I will later invite you to watch a video on children with disabilities, and this touches on how we can properly guarantee the rights of these persons. Many thanks indeed.
Thank
Quiero agradecer
I wish to thank Maria Soledad Cisterna Reyes, Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, for her statement. I now, with great pleasure, invite Ms. Ana Lucia Arellana, a civil society representative of IDA, to deliver a statement.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. I'm here today representing the disability movement. We are united as a movement to shift from words to action. Action for the people in this room and for more than 1 billion people we represent. In the last year since we met, a lot of significant progress has been achieved in the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. The first ever Global Disability Summit held in London in July 2018, which was co-hosted by the UK and Kenyan government, as well as International Disability Alliance. And also the follow-up summit that was just held a few days ago in Buenos Aires, that was also co-hosted by the International Disability Alliance and the government of Argentina. The creation of the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy that was just announced by the Secretary General, we would like to very much welcome the work of the UN in making its organization and programs inclusive of persons with disabilities and their rights. Persons with disabilities were for the first time included in the deliberation of the Security Council in December 2018. These new developments will de facto create a new demands on organizations of persons with disabilities at all levels. For example, the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, to be truly successful and sustainable, a meaningful involvement of organizations of persons with disabilities at the national level as well as at the regional and global level is a must. This demand will create a new strain on the capacities of organizations of persons with disabilities to deliver. Therefore, a strategic thinking is needed on how to urgently strengthen organizations of persons with disabilities to serve as partners to many of the stakeholders, including UN and member states, in delivering of new commitments as well as CRPD and SDGs. Further, unfortunately, we continue to report a number of setbacks and obstacles, especially from the implementation of the CRPD and SDGs at the national level. We continue to hear reports of our partners at the national levels that services for persons with disabilities are being cut, and the fiscal space for implementation of the rights is continuing to shrink. Implementation of the Agenda 2030 is still not inclusive of persons with disabilities at the national level. Very concerning promotion of mental health debate that is not inclusive of human rights-based approach, and especially of participation of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Yesterday, over 400 representatives from organizations of persons with disabilities, civil society, governments, multilateral organizations, and the private sector met to discuss these obstacles, as well as to see how best organizations of persons with disabilities can contribute and act as partners to many of the positive developments and new commitments of the world leaders, and how to make many of you that were just raised by you inside this room. We had reflections on what is the current state of play in the promotion of rights of persons with disabilities, on capacity building, and on protecting the rights of children with disabilities. Now, collectively, we wish to share the following message. We recognize the need to increase the meaningful consultation and involvement of persons with disabilities and their organizations in all decision-making processes. We call for increased investment in and partnership with a diversity of organizations of persons with disabilities, particularly the most marginalized groups, and including peer mentorship at the grassroots level. We urgently call for an investment in the capacity building of all stakeholders, government, multilaterals, and broader civil society, to implement the CRPD and Agenda 2030 for persons with disabilities. We recognize successful practices in capacity building, such as the Bridge CRPD SDGs training, and call for such initiatives to receive additional support and be more readily available. We call on actions to build the capacity of youth with disabilities and to increase their engagement in forums such as this. They are our new generation of leaders. We recognize the right of every child with a disability, regardless of their support needs, to grow up in the community on an equal basis with other children. We also recognize the role of family and know that institutionalization remains one of the major concerns for the future of children with disabilities. We have seen and experienced an extraordinary work that we can do, all of us together. There is a lot to celebrate indeed. Especially from the Global Disability Summit last year, we feel that the new way of movement to promote rights of persons with disabilities has been started. And we believe that we share today a unique opportunity and responsibility to benefit from this wave and to mobilize commitments to real change. And to once for all start taking the implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities very seriously. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Agradezco a la...
I thank Ms. Arellano for her statement. We have now reached the end of our opening session. I want to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and all the representatives for their statements. At this point, I request a brief 2-minute pause so that we at the podium can be excused from the podium and continue with the business of the day. Thank you.
The UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility and UNICEF present children and adolescents with disabilities from around the world reading 10 principles for their protection, well-being and development. Principle 1.
I exist as I am.
I am a person just like you.
I deserve to be respected and have my diversity valued.
I have the same human rights as you and everyone else.
Principle 2.
I like that you're kind to me.
Love me and play with me. You would like to be loved and treated equally too.
Have my best interests at heart and enjoy life with me.
Principle 3.
I like that you take care of me, protect me, and teach me how to protect myself.
I will also be there for you in my own way.
In my own way.
Principle 4.
I want you to accept me as I am, help me develop my abilities and talents, and give me a good quality education.
I'm happy when you see my strengths.
And help me to engage with others.
Principle 5.
I like that you listen to me, explain things to me, and consider my opinion.
This makes me feel safe and helps me learn and develop.
Principle 6.
Name?
I like that you believe in me and you help me grow.
This strengthens my self-esteem, my capacity, and my autonomy.
Principle 7.
I like that you understand me, support me, and reassure me when I'm upset, angry, or frustrated.
Often, it is in these moments that I need you the most.
Principle 8.
I like that you include me.
I want to live in a friendly, peaceful, and inclusive environment, and for you to respect and support how I communicate best.
Principle 9.
I want you to respect me and protect me from all forms of violence
everywhere and all the time.
just like anyone else. My body,
My soul and my mind
Deserve to be protected.
protected.
Principle 10.
It matters to me that you believe me.
I need to be trusted, just like you.
These 10 principles are part of a new campaign initiated by Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, the UN Secretary-General Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, to promote good treatment of children and adolescents with disabilities. Outtakes of the children with disabilities. Special thanks to UNICEF country offices in Bhutan, Brazil, Croatia, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Oman, Paraguay, and South Africa.
Who said?
Please be seated.
I now call to order this section. I now give the Secretariat the floor to make an announcement concerning safety and security documents, logistics, including accessibility requirements, and other practical information about the conference. You have the floor, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Secretariat wishes to make the following announcement. To support the participation of delegates and other participants in the conference, the Secretariat has made relevant information available in an accessible format at UN-Enable website www.un.org/disabilities. Accessibility. The United Nations is committed to promoting accessibility at its headquarters and beyond. The UN Secretariat, DESA, Department of Management, and the Department of General Assembly and Conference Management are in collaboration, and we will do our utmost to facilitate accessibility requirements of the delegation and other participants at this conference. Based on the requests received by the Secretariat, we have made accessibility arrangements, including modification of the seating in conference rooms to accommodate accessibility needs of participants. We have also made available international sign language interpretation and closed caption subtitling CART services during this session. Official documentation. The conference has the following 4 documents, including provisional agenda, 3 background papers for the 3 thematic roundtable discussions. All of those documents are available in 6 UN official languages and posted in both the UN Pager Smart portal and the UN-Enable website at www.un.org/disabilities. A number of copies of the 4 official documents are produced in Braille and large print formats to meet the needs of delegates who inform the Secretariat of such needs. These delegations are able to get their documents in Braille or large print at the conference from the conference service officer near the podium in this hall. For all those delegations that require, who have not informed the Secretariat before the deadline of informing their accessibility needs, please visit the UN Accessibility Center to make an arrangement for any needs, any requests for producing Braille or any other accessibility requirements. The center is located at the same floor of this center is located at the basement level, and we will try to provide assistance as much as possible. Paper Smart. The 12th session of the conference is a Paper Smart meeting. All delegations that wish to post their full statement for the general debate kindly requested to forward a copy of finalized statements in Microsoft Word format, which is accessible by email to papersmart@un.org. P as capital, paper, smart, SMART, number 4, at un.org. So it's papersmart4@un.org. The statements from the delegation will be posted in the UN PaperSmart portal right after the delivery of statements, right after the delivery of the statements. And this will be noted in the official report of the conference at a later date. Thank you very much.
I thank the Secretariat for the announcement. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to item 5A on the agenda, which is the general debate. Inscription to the general debate was initially announced during the informal briefing on the preparations of the conference on 7 May. An announcement on the general debate was accordingly placed in the UN Journal. The speakers list was open for inscription between May 21 and June 4 and was closed by 6 p.m. of June 4. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to draw your attention to the 3-minute time limit which was anticipated in the guidance note and communicated to all delegations in the UN Journal announcement. A copy of the guidance note is also before you for your reference. As the Vice President of the conference and acting chair, I wish to seek your full cooperation in strictly observing the 3-minute limit in your statement. The longer the general debate, the shorter the interactive sessions. By abiding to the time limit, delegations inscribed on the speakers list will contribute to safeguarding the substantive character of the Conference of States Parties. The Bureau has tasked the chair to impose the time limit. For this purpose, technical devices are put in place. Therefore, all speakers are kindly suggested to try wrapping up your statement from the end of your 2 minutes while your microphone starts flashing, indicating that you will have 1 more minute. As just announced by the Secretariat, delegations can also avail themselves of the opportunity to post your full text of statements by sending a soft copy to papersmart4@un.org for posting there electronically. In addition, the official conference report will also reflect all delegations thus delivering or submitting statements. With this, may I invite the distinguished representative of Argentina in their capacity as Vice President to deliver a statement. In line with that, I now invite Her Excellency Gabriela Michel to make a statement. You have the floor.
Thank you. Señor Presidente de la Conferencia.
Mr. President of the conference, dear friends, I'm very happy now to be able to share this important moment with all of you. At this Conference of States Parties, it is my honor to head the delegation of my country because I am convinced that it is down the path of international cooperation that you arrive at inclusion. We have found our path to truth in Argentina after having shown that it is possible to have consultation and participation of civil society in the process of formulation of public policy. Today, thanks to the work of our National Statistics Office, we can reassure you, in Argentina we have more than 4 million people with disabilities. We know all the characteristics and distribution over our national territory. We not only have a model statistical product, but the book of results is a reader-friendly book. And we commit with the standards of the Washington Group, holding its 19th World Meeting this year in our country, raising high the flag of data comparability worldwide. So now, what is it that the cross-cutting topic of this conference is proposing to us? Consolidating our endeavors towards abolition of discrimination in all of its form, with truth as our standard. As you can see in Article 8 of the Convention, raising awareness is the very first step towards readiness in our approach to disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing the tremendous responsibility of ensuring the ways and means to produce conversation on the rights of persons with disabilities within our communities. And to achieve this, we have to take action. From our humble corner of the planet, we are doing just that. With various initiatives, we have means of communication created that has not been politicized, but quite the contrary. It has been strengthened institutionally. Hiding just doesn't work. Visibility is what is right. We have to have this as a state policy and not government. Vidas Reales, Real Lives, is media that did not look to put stigma on the person and limiting opportunities. A few days ago, we hosted the second Global Summit on Disabilities. We believe that opportunities for people with disabilities should be able to meet the full potential. I have the hope that this conference and the recent Global Summit are the fora wherefrom we can promote human rights agendas from Geneva, New York, the 2030 Agenda, and we should place these at the heart of our public policy. Our responsibility as civil servants is that of establishing conditions so that persons with disabilities can never be left out of national, regional, or international public policy. As a woman, a person with a disability, and Vice President of the country of Argentina, it is my great honor to be part of this change for all of us. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, the Vice President of Argentina, for her statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Madam Rocio Gonzalez de Moreno, First Lady and Chair of the Delegation of Ecuador, to make her statement.
Amigas y amigos. Friends, at the outset I wish to extend to you warm greetings on behalf of the President of the Republic of Ecuador, Lenín Moreno Garcés. It is an honor to once again address you. I do so as the head of the delegation of my country and as the chair of the Committee on the One Life Plan, and I also address you as the partner of a person with a disability. In our personal life, we have confronted physical barriers, but above all of that, and perhaps more importantly, we have confronted barriers placed before us in terms of other people's attitudes. Today, we have an opportunity as a state to fully shoulder our responsibilities to overcome challenges facing persons with disabilities and to ensure that persons with disabilities can effectively participate in society. I have also witnessed in my personal life the progress made since the convention's inception. We have made progress together to ensure that gradually we are guaranteeing the rights of persons with disabilities, remaining faithful to the mandate that we shouldered, with the commitment that there would be nothing about us without us. In a changing world, events occur and gather pace, indeed at breakneck speed, and against that backdrop, states have the obligation to overcome the challenges faced with generating conditions that allow persons with disabilities to fully enjoy their rights. There can be no development achieved if we do not have inclusive societies. Agenda 2030 allows us to ensure that we have multiple mechanisms in place to guarantee the inclusion on an equal footing in all spheres of life of persons with disabilities. We must harness technologies, ITCs in general, to empower persons with disabilities. There are rights such as the enjoyment of the highest possible level of health, the participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure and sport that incorporate values such as solidarity and the respect of individual characteristics and traits that each and every human being enjoys. All of these rights must always be enjoyed, and constant effort must be made to ensure that these rights are not lost. 2 years ago, the government of Ecuador began to implement, indeed, the Plan One Life, a public policy designed to ensure a holistic approach is adopted to those that are most vulnerable. We are prioritising, in this regard, persons with disabilities and their families. Today, I'm here to share with you our experience, and indeed to do so with great pride, but also I want to talk about our responsibility to continue to make progress. Much remains to be done. The Mission Las Manuelas is a policy which promotes the rights of persons with disabilities to ensure that they can fully guarantee their rights. This initiative has identified 13,000 persons with disabilities living in poverty and has provided more than 167,000 technical forms of technical support through our institutions that work with persons with disabilities. Also, we have the plan A House for All, and through that plan we are building sustainable communities in which more than 20,000 houses are allocated to persons with disabilities, allowing them to live a decent life. And we're ensuring that we uphold the concepts of accessibility and universal design in this regard. These projects are designed to be safe spaces in which inhabitants are able to be entrepreneurs and are able to receive training and are able to meet with each other and to participate in their communities. Dear friends, we must pool all of our efforts and be guided by the needs of persons with disabilities. We must work together as state, civil society, the private sector and academia. And it's only in doing that that we'll be able to espouse the values of the Convention. Indeed, our endeavours must be embodied by tangible programmes and policies. Microphone for the speaker, please. The microphone is being cut off. The microphone has been cut off.
We thank Her Excellency, the First Lady and Chair of Delegation of Ecuador, for her statement. We now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sam Tang, Minister from Singapore, to make his statement. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Singapore is committed to building an inclusive society where persons with disabilities are recognized, empowered, and given every opportunity to be integral and contributing members of the society. This year's conference theme of ensuring inclusion in a changing world through implementations of a CRPD resonates very strongly with Singapore. Every 5 years, Singapore reviews our enabling master plan. This is our national roadmap for disability policies and initiatives, and our implementations of the CRPD. Our regular reviews ensure that our efforts reflect the prevailing context, address the latest needs of our citizens and stakeholders, and anticipate challenges ahead. Together with our community partners, we have made significant progress under the first 2 master plans in the areas of early education and intervention, education, training and employment, transportation, and assistive technologies. In addition, we have undertaken concerted efforts to improve Singapore's built environment, with close to 100% of our public transportation system barrier-free and wheelchair accessible. We have also seen greater participations of persons with disabilities in the community, in sports, and the arts through initiatives such as the Disability Sports Master Plan and the annual Arts and Disability Platform. We are breaking down social barriers to inclusion with public education campaigns. Upon these foundations, we are now pushing forward with our 3rd master plan to provide support for persons with disabilities across all stages of their lives, as well as for their caregivers. The Singapore government will continue to work closely with community partners to embrace new challenges and develop more coordinated and targeted support. Our current focus is on building a model for inclusive preschools, preparing students with special needs for the future economy, and leveraging technology and design for independent living. And we look forward to sharing more details at the conference and to also learn from others. We continually strive to better our efforts in building the hardware, software, and the hardware of an inclusive Singapore. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Position from New Zealand. I thank His Excellency, Minister of State for Social and Family Development of Singapore for his statement. We now give the floor to Her Excellency Kamel Sipuloni, Minister for Social Development and Disability Issues of New Zealand, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa. New Zealand welcomes this year's focus on ensuring inclusion of persons with disabilities in a changing world through the implementation of the Convention of the Rights for Persons with Disabilities. Meaningful implementation of the Convention needs to take into account the changes occurring in our societies at home and overseas. Technology presents exciting opportunities to enhance inclusion and participation for persons with disabilities. A recent survey led by government and disabled people's organisations will inform future work to ensure New Zealand keeps pace with global technological changes. New Zealand's disability strategy envisages New Zealand as a non-disabling society where persons with disabilities have equal opportunities to achieve their goals and aspirations. The strategy is supported by a disability action plan and an outcomes framework. Together, these mechanisms form the basis of implementation of the Convention in New Zealand. These are jointly governed by the government and disabled people's organisations. One of the strategy's outcome areas is that we access all places, services and information with ease and dignity. I have a cabinet mandate to design an approach to achieve a fully accessible New Zealand in consultation with stakeholders. This will include exploring the feasibility of using legislation that provides for standards and codes for accessibility. The Pacific region matters deeply to New Zealand. Our prosperity and security are intertwined, and we have deep cultural, people-to-people, historical and economic links. The challenges faced by persons with disabilities are intensified by a unique combination of factors in the region. These include economic inequality, societal norms, vulnerability to natural disasters, and geographic isolation. New Zealand is committed to building deeper partnerships with its Pacific neighbours. I am pleased to announce a new partnership between New Zealand and the Pacific Disability Forum. At the UN, we welcome the recent approval of the UN Disabilities Inclusion Strategy. New Zealand is looking forward to presenting the next third committee resolution on the Convention. This resolution will focus on accessibility. New Zealand is also pleased to announce that we are nominating Robert Martin for re-election to the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. New Zealand strongly believes that meaningful implementation of the Convention should be for all persons with disabilities. As the first and only person with a learning disability to have served on the committee, Robert Martin brings a valuable perspective to this role. In conclusion, Chair, the world is changing fast. How we implement the Convention must be informed by the changing world around us to ensure no one is left behind. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Madam Sipuloni, the Minister of Social Development and Disability Issues from New Zealand, for her statement. We now give the floor to Her Excellency Carla Quatreau, Minister from Canada, for her statement. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, distinguished guests. As Minister of Accessibility and as a person with a disability, it is an honor to be here today to represent Canada at the 12th Conference of State Parties of the UN CRPD. Le Canada demeure pleinement.
Canada remains fully committed to the Convention, and we continue to strengthen our approach to disability rights, inclusion, and accessibility in our rapidly changing world.
Canada is making fundamental shifts in two key ways. First, we are framing our public policy discourse in human rights. By this, I mean the rights of full citizenship and the civic, political, and economic participation of our citizens with disabilities. We are moving beyond the practice of relying on an individual accommodation to address discrimination and are moving towards inclusion. Second, we are moving beyond the mantra of nothing about us without us to nothing without us, because everything is about us. There is not one aspect of legal, political, social, or economic decision-making that does not impact our citizens with disabilities. Our new rallying cry recognizes this. These are the foundational principles of Canada's first ever federal accessibility legislation, the Accessible Canada Act, which has been unanimously supported by Canadian parliamentarians and is set to receive royal assent next week. This legislation enhances our federal human rights framework to proactively identify and remove barriers to inclusion for Canadians with disabilities. It also designates the Canadian Human Rights Commission to formally monitor the Government of Canada's implementation of the Convention. This includes oversight of the optional protocol, which I'm proud to say Canada acceded to in December 2018. Our commitment to the Convention has never been stronger and is reflected in our close collaboration with our civil society and international partners. Just this spring, we had the honor of welcoming UN Special Rapporteur Catalina de Vandas on her first visit to Canada. In May, we co-hosted the annual meeting of the Global Action on Disability Network. We also hosted the Government of Canada's first National Disability Summit to take stock on our progress and collaboratively identify opportunities to continue to move our country towards full inclusion. I look forward to further exchanges of knowledge, experiences, and ideas with partner countries to support broader implementation of the Convention as we collectively move the world towards inclusion. Thank you. Merci.
We thank Her Excellency, Madam Quatreau, Minister of Public Services and Procurement and Accessibility of Canada, for her statement. In line with the rules as agreed upon, we now take or give the floor to the distinguished representative of the International Disability Alliance for a statement. You have the floor.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues. The International Disability Alliance is a network of 8 global and 6 regional organizations of persons with disabilities and their families. Together, the members of the Alliance represent over 1,100 national organizations of persons with disabilities, otherwise known as DPOs, in more than 180 countries worldwide. IDA would like to acknowledge and thank the current Bureau of the Conference of States Parties for their work in planning and developing this year's COSP, notwithstanding some challenges which were overcome. Over this past year, we have witnessed the beginning of a new phase in the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. To name a few developments, there was the Global Disability Summit in London, the subsequent summit last week in Argentina, the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, and the rights of persons with disabilities being addressed and considered by the UN Security Council. Despite the foregoing positive steps, we note the problematic lack of financial commitments to implement the CRPD from the global to the community level. We have seen a decrease in fiscal space for the implementation of the CRPD in some countries. And we have experienced insufficient resources and capacities to effectively include all groups of persons with disabilities in the development and humanitarian agenda. As well, we are concerned that meaningful consultations with DPOs is shrinking in some countries. We are also concerned that there is insufficient capacity building and a lack of financial support for organizations of persons with disabilities, especially at the national and local level. For example, the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, to be fully successful at the national level, will need to promote and support collaboration between UN country teams and national organizations of persons with disabilities. Organizations of persons with disabilities require increased capacity and resources to fulfill their advocacy mandate and to provide technical expertise to governments, as well as to follow international processes in Geneva and New York. Therefore, we call on member states and the UN system to, number 1, invest in the capacity of organizations of persons with disabilities. We want to recommend an urgent, significant, and coordinated investment in capacities of representative organizations of persons with disabilities, particularly underrepresented groups, to be able to meaningfully engage in many of the processes mentioned previously. 2, provide unified political support as well as financial resources to the UN Disability Inclusive Strategy to ensure gains made will be sustainable and long-lasting. 3, mainstream the rights of persons with disabilities across the peace and security agenda and the humanitarian sector. We also call for more partnerships with organizations of persons with disabilities to develop inclusive humanitarian responses. In closing, we thank you for your commitment to achieving these goals to fulfill the principles of the CRPD.
I thank the distinguished representative of the International Disability Alliance for the statement. We now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Oko Yatani, Cabinet Secretary Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of the Republic of Kenya, for his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. Kenya is honored to participate in this 12th session, which provides us with a platform to inform on the steps taken to implement the commitment on the CRPD we made during the 11th session of the conference last year. Kenya has developed a national action plan to provide a framework to guide in the implementation of establishing an interagency coordinating committee with the responsibility of coordination and monitoring of the implementation of these commitments. The committee comprises of both state and non-state actors. The theme of this conference resonates with the Kenya's Vision 2030 Development Blueprint and our constitutional provision on the rights of persons with disabilities and a right-based approach to disability work. The Persons with Disabilities Amendment Bill has attained approval by the Cabinet, awaiting debate in Parliament. The bill takes further the domestication of the CRPD and empowers the National Council for Persons with Disabilities to regulate services provided to those persons. In addition, Senate also is working on a bill that will ensure implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities at both levels of government. Stigma and discrimination, however, remains of concern to the CRPD. Towards this, the government, together with the stakeholders is developing a disability awareness raising booklet as a resource to assist in demystifying instability. Mr. President, following the directive by the President of Kenya, the Ministries of Education and National Treasury developed a policy and a plan to support learners with disabilities which emphasizes inclusive education. Towards this, progressive allocation of funds for equipment, infrastructure, and teacher training for inclusive education, scholarships, and economic empowerment grants, sub-screen lotions for persons with albinism, among others, has been attained. The Constitution of Kenya provides for affirmative action to ensure that persons with disabilities are represented in appointive and elective positions to both national and county levels of government. Mr. President, I reiterate that the availability of quality data can inform interventions for persons with disabilities remains our priority. We therefore appreciate that the Washington short set of questions was recommended by UN agencies, organizations of persons with disabilities, civil society, and the independent experts to ensure international comparability will be used during the upcoming National Housing and Population Census in August this year. As I conclude, I reaffirm Kenya's commitment to the inclusion of the concerns of our citizens with disabilities on all aspects of a national development of it. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kenya for his statement. We now give the floor to Her Excellency Hessa Essa Buhumed, Minister of Community Development of the United Arab Emirates, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure at the outset to express my thanks to the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and to yourself, as well as the members of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as representatives of civil society, for your efforts in ensuring implementation of the Convention, which is fully in line with our policy in the UAE in a changing world. The UAE is continuing its efforts to enable and protect persons with disabilities through the implementation of a strategy and legislation and initiatives for persons with disabilities. In order to implement the provisions of the Convention in accordance with our national laws. This is part of a wider strategy to promote and protect human rights in the UAE. In 2019, we declared a year of tolerance in order to encourage acceptance of difference between cultures. and to ensure that nobody falls behind. In light of the UAE's efforts to implement Article 31 of the Convention on the gathering of data and statistics, we adopted the policy of creating a high commission for persons with disability, and a plan has been adopted as a strong backbone of the state's efforts to ensure the satisfaction of the needs of persons with disabilities. In order to raise the quality of life of persons with disabilities and to ensure their independence in accordance to Articles 9, 19, and 20 of the Convention, we have adopted the Emirati Code for an Enabling Environment, adopted in 2019. This provides services to various sectors of society. And we have adopted a policy on education to provide all educational opportunities to persons with disabilities. We have attempted to open more work opportunities to persons with disabilities in accordance with Article 27 of the Convention. The state has adopted a decision to enable persons with disabilities in the labor force on an equal footing with all others. We believe that the exchange of experiences and expertise is the best way to ensure implementation of the Convention. We therefore participated in the Davos Summit in order to set forth our experience and achievements made in this regard. With the participation of more than 170 countries, Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE, has hosted the Special Olympics Abu Dhabi 2019, one of the most united Special Olympics in history. It is more than a mere sports event at the international level. Such events help to improve quality of life and the role of disabled persons in society. The microphone has been cut off. The speaker cannot be heard.
Is she still speaking? We thank. Can we give, please, the distinguished representative of UAE an applause? We thank the distinguished representative of UAE for her statement. We would like to remind all of our speakers of the time limit in line with the rules. We now give the floor to Her Excellency, Madam Sika Nzenza, Minister of Public Service, Labor and Social Affairs, Minister of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare of Zimbabwe for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Chairperson, it is an honor for me to deliver Zimbabwe's statement on some of the practical measures taken by the government of Zimbabwe to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and share this experience with other member states. Zimbabwe crafted its national disability policy in conformity with its international obligations to enhance the implementation of the CRPD, which it ratified and domesticated together with its optional protocol in 2013. The Zimbabwe government has continued to prioritize social inclusion development strategies, including empowering PWDs through our quota systems to access ownership of land, education, allocation of residential stands, houses, loans, and national pension schemes. The appointment of a presidential advisor on disability issues, the creation of a separate Department of Disability Affairs in my ministry, and the establishment and management of a national database for all PWDs demonstrate Zimbabwe's commitment to enhance the implementation of the CRPD. Chairperson, the government of Zimbabwe has also remained the largest and most secure employer of persons with disabilities in the formal job market. Under the President of Zimbabwe, E.D. Mnangagwa, during the Second Republic, we have a vision to make Zimbabwe a middle-income economy in 2030. In doing so, Zimbabwe has introduced multi-sectorial approach to address the scourge of violence against women, girls, and children with disabilities through the establishment of one-stop centers and victim-friendly systems offering free specialist services and support to victims and survivors of gender-based violence. The Zimbabwe government has also established a permanent forum for continuous engagement with various people with disabilities. The composition of Zimbabwe's delegation chairperson to this conference is a testimony to this inclusive representation. Here with me is Senator Malinga and Senator Kupe. Let me take this opportunity to also express Zimbabwe's gratitude to the international community for the timely response that we received, having suffered the devastating effects of Cyclone Idai. Among the victims and survivors of the cyclone were people living with disabilities. In conclusion, Chairperson, Zimbabwe remains committed to the effective implementation of the CRPD through inclusive policies for people living with disabilities. And we also join the international community in annually commemorating the International Day of People with Disabilities. Chairperson, I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe for her statement and now give the floor to Her Excellency Mariaman Sila, Minister of Health and Social Action, for promoting women and children of the Republic of Guinea for her statement. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Guinea is delighted to attend this 12th session. The relevance and the interest of the items on the agenda constitute a call to action on the part of states parties to ensure that they can effectively implement the United Nations Convention on Persons with Disabilities. I'd like to recall the fact that my country ratified this convention and its optional protocol on the 16th of February 2008. It is true that progress with the implementation of this legal instrument has taken a while to really take root in our social fabric. We should nevertheless recognise the fact that since the ushering in of the Third Republic under the aegis of His Excellency the President of the Republic, Professor Alpha Condé, positive initiatives have been undertaken. I will sum them up and boil them down to three main ones. In my country, the public are discovering with interest the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Now, this event has become a highly anticipated event, warmly supported by the government and the United Nations agencies. It receives a great deal of media coverage. The day is indeed lauded by associations looking to protect persons with disabilities, and is a day conducted under the aegis of the Prime Minister. It takes place on the 3rd of December, and has now become a forum for advocacy, discussion and freedom, where taboo can be broken down and we can discover the hidden talents of persons with disabilities. Secondly, we've seen the establishment of a specific law for the benefit of persons with disabilities. It was unanimously adopted by the honourable members of the National Assembly and was enacted by a presidential decree. This law provides unprecedented guarantees for the protection of rights. We are ushering in equal opportunity cards, which will be issued to persons with disabilities, and they will afford greater access to jobs, education, healthcare and transport for persons with disabilities. Thirdly, pursuant to the National Plan for Economic and Social Development, that indeed is the key reference point for development endeavours for 2016-2020. Pursuant to that plan, the government of my country, through my department, is striving to take into account the needs of persons with disabilities in development programmes. We are looking to empower and include persons with disabilities. It is in light of all of the above that I can say that I am proud of the endeavours undertaken by my government. We've acceded to the United Nations agenda, whose slogan is to leave no one behind. We have allocated budgetary resources to the development of 4 inclusive learning and training centres for persons with disabilities. The United Nations Development Programme is supporting our work in this regard, and I warmly thank them. We'd like to take this opportunity to present to you our development agenda and call for the support of multilateral and bilateral partners to ultimately support the millions of people living in my country with disabilities. They need to tap into be able to tap into their potential. We're focusing on strengthening institutional mechanisms, empowering persons with disabilities socio and economically. We're looking to continue with advocacy and to tackle stigmatization. We hope to ensure equal opportunities between all men. Thank you for your men and women. Thank you for your kind attention.
We thank the distinguished representative of Guinea for her statement, and now give the floor to Her Excellency Ana Sofia Antunes, Secretary of State of Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities of Portugal, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Bom dia a todos os membros.
Mr. President, I have the honor to address you today on behalf of the Portuguese government. And speaking on my mother tongue, to strengthen here the commitment of Portuguese government with the rights of persons with disabilities and with the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is an honor for me to be here today and share with you that Portugal made a long path on this subject. We had a period of economic crisis with austerity measures, with no flexibility, that some measures had to be taken with attention, with the non-application to the most vulnerable public. These measures, I have the honor to say here that Portugal is living now a new paradigm shift since 2015 till today. It's a period where we approved a new specific legislation to protect the rights of persons with disabilities, approve concrete measures towards the necessities of these citizens, and measures that can put an end to an old assistential model that can still in place. 2 years ago in this same room, I had the opportunity to share with you that Portugal was creating a new social benefit for persons with disabilities, and I can affirm today with pride that this new benefit for all persons with disability is a new benefit for the citizens, for persons with disabilities. Today, more than 93,000 persons with disability are already covered with this benefit. More than that, today in Portugal, we have a new model of independent living that created so far 21 centers supporting more than 700 persons with disabilities with a budget of around 35 million euros. These measures goes along with the new legislation on the inclusion in the education field for persons with disabilities, and add also to the recent possibility launched this year to a special line for emergency telephone line for deaf population, with also measures to eliminate barriers, and also new regulation on the private sector are some of the measures Portugal government implemented this year. I want to conclude and say in front of all of you that as a lady and as a person with disability, and also as a member of the Portuguese government, we reinforced
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal for her statement, and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Inclusion International. You have the floor.
Respected delegates, colleagues, disability allies, friends, I am Sue Swenson, President of Inclusion International. Inclusion International is the global network of people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We represent over 200 members in more than 110 countries throughout the 5 continents. Our work is about advocacy and supporting our members to ensure the implementation of the CRPD and the 2030 Agenda. Institutions remain one of the main challenges many countries must face to achieve the goals of the CRPD. People with intellectual disabilities are still institutionalized, whether in large institutions, residential care, or group homes. The main reason for having institutions is the lack of appropriate, affordable, and accessible services and supports in the community. It is impossible for governments to support 2 parallel systems. The solution is to invest in community-based services and support for persons with intellectual disabilities and their families. We demand that all institutions are closed and that no institutional type settings are built again. This is one of Inclusion International's calls to action this year. This demand has emerged from our members throughout the world, who raised the deinstitutionalization of people with intellectual disabilities as one of their strongest ongoing advocacy priorities. In every country, families, very often mothers and sisters, of people with intellectual disabilities are the main caregivers, supporters, and advocates for their relative with intellectual disabilities. That's why it's important to include families in all decision-making processes and in debates discussing the implementation of the CRPD. General comment number 7 on Article 4.3 and 33.3 adopted last year recognizes organizations of families as organizations of persons with disabilities. Supporting families means giving them advocacy tools and making community services accessible for people with intellectual disabilities, ranging from inclusive schools to non-discriminatory health care, to accessible community resources, to respectful jobs, and to the right to form their own families. The family is more than an instrument for decent public policy. The family is the most powerful human institution. Even so, a family may be ruptured by the lack of community support. Families raise and nurture the next generation. They create the basis of belonging in community. Families carry our cultures forward. A disabled child or adult can be a powerful member of any family, often bringing topics of human rights into the experience of daily living and creating an awareness of disability culture that can persist for generations. Sometimes families need only a small support, such as information, but we may need it desperately. Sometimes we need to learn to advocate for a son or daughter's rights. Some families require very significant support to care for a loved one with dignity at home. Whether families are supported well or badly, everyone in the family is affected. Mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, extended family, as well as the person with the disability. It is no mistake that the most powerful language about human rights is rooted in the family. We are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood. It is all we ask of you today.
We thank the distinguished President of Inclusion International for her statement and give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Cesar Martinez, Minister of National Secretariat for the Human Rights of Persons with Disabilities of Paraguay, for his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Presidente.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the delegation of Paraguay, I would like to greet you and the members of the Bureau and wish you full success at this meeting. My delegation also endorses a statement to be given on behalf of the group of Friends of Older Persons. In my country, disability is in a favorable position for the implementation of policies benefiting persons with disabilities, as they are part of the priorities of the government of President Mario Abdo Benitez. The 3rd of December 2018 is the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and we have an act of commitment signed by the President and members of his cabinet to demonstrate the interest of his government, seeing them as a priority. This is a clear demonstration of the commitment of our national government for revitalization of the interinstitutional coordination necessary to promote the implementation of the aims of the plan in favor of persons with disabilities. Paraguay established a joint working mechanism with state institutions through the System for Monitoring Recommendations on Human Rights, CIMORE, allowing to monitor implementation of international recommendations on human rights. We have a national plan of action for persons with disabilities approved by executive decree showing empowerment of persons with disability and their families as protagonists of the process of the plan, involvement of other ministries in this area for planning, communication, education, childhood and adolescence, original population, work, employment, accessibility, language, and civil service, women inter alia. Another key action is the establishment of the National Committee for Persons with Disabilities, CONADIS, as a key forum for the development of an interagency dialogue between state organizations and civil society. Furthermore, in the legislative power, we have standing committees on disabilities in both houses, and a decree law declared the state of emergency for 12 months of the situation of disability. Furthermore, following the Marrakesh Treaty, I'd like to say that the Ministry for Education and Science has rules whereby all textbooks acquired must be available in accessible digital formats. Mr. Chairman, we're aware that there is still plenty to be done in this area. However, we can say that Paraguay has made significant progress as to rules and norms. Now we have the challenge of transforming the situation of persons with disabilities so that everybody can exercise and fully enjoy their civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights, thus being able to participate in and enrich the life of our society. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Paraguay for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Damaris Alves, Minister of Human Rights of Brazil, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Mr. President, we are very moved to be here participating in this conference alongside leaders who fight for the rights and the full inclusion of people with disabilities around the world. In Brazil, the CRPD has been adopted into the Brazilian legal system at the level of a constitutional norm. The Bolsonaro administration met one of its priority goals for its first 100 days when it enacted part of the Brazilian inclusion law, an important step for the effective implementation of the convention. We also sanctioned last week a law which ensures visually impaired people the right to receive bank cards in Braille, and another law which makes it mandatory to report whether a woman victim of domestic violence is a person with a disability. The Brazilian government aims to combat all kinds of violence, including within those few indigenous communities who still sacrifice members of their community simply because they have some disability. Our countries need to invest more in accessibility, communication, and above all, in a change of attitudes. So I am very pleased that this 12th session of the conference focuses on awareness. President Jair Bolsonaro's commitment to this cause became clear at his inauguration when First Lady Michelle Bolsonaro delivered a speech in Brazilian Sign Language, recognized by law as a second official Brazilian language. We defend the inclusion of the teaching of sign language in the curriculum of all schools, and we believe that we can become a true bilingual country in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, Brazil is experiencing an unprecedented moment in which people with disabilities have attained positions of greater and greater prominence. Take, for example, our National Secretary for the Rights of Persons with Disability, Madam Priscila Gaspar, the first deaf person to hold such a high position in the federal government. Public policies need to be planned and implemented with the direct involvement of people with disabilities. Finally, it should be stressed that we are reshaping policies for people with disabilities to emphasize care for their families who face extreme situations and need increased support. We also have a commitment to the babies with microcephaly who must have their rights to be born guaranteed. President Bolsonaro's directive is clear. Let us transform Brazil into the country of inclusion. Thank you very much.
We thank the distinguished representative of Brazil for her statement, and now give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Helene Marie Laurence Abudu Machel, Minister of Women, National Solidarity, Family and Humanitarian Action of Burkina Faso, to make her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, allow me, first of all, to congratulate you, as well as the other members of the Bureau, on your election to lead this session. Burkina Faso is delighted to attend this 12th session and commends the themes chosen that will be subject to our discussion. And we'll consider these issues when we look at, in connection to the implementation of Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Mr. Chair, Burkina Faso's commitment to accede to the Convention and its protocol is based, inter alia, on the policy programme of the President of our Republic. That is the National Programme for Economic and Social Development, the PNDS, and the Sustainable Development Goals, which take into account the need to harness human capital and ensure social protection for all. These commitments have achieved tangible form on a national level through the adoption of several legislative provisions and regulatory provisions, as well as action specific initiatives looking to meet the specific needs of persons with disabilities and ensure their inclusions. We have established a national forum for persons with disabilities, and this was followed up by a dialogue between the President of my Republic and persons with disabilities. United Nations bodies have looked at the Burkina Faso's commitment to the convention and said that we've been successful. Now we're looking to favour the entry of persons with disabilities into public office, and we're providing direct support to persons with disabilities so that they can achieve socio-economic empowerment, namely by financing 300,000 individual entrepreneurial projects. Mr. Chair, all of these results have been achieved thanks to significant technical and financial support provided by Burkina Faso's partners. I take this opportunity to invite our bilateral and multilateral partners, as well as non-governmental organisations, to extend their support to build operational capacity within the ministry responsible for disability issues, and this in order to allow the ministry to better respond to the concerns and needs of persons with disabilities. In order to meet these needs, we're looking to do the following, namely provide specific care to women and children with disabilities, namely in areas where there are security issues, and we're looking to establish a national report on the situations of persons with disabilities in Burkina Faso. To conclude, I wish to say that we wish that we will be fully able to tap into the full potential of our dialogue here today in order to share experiences for the benefit of persons with disabilities, because now more than ever before, no one must be left behind, and we are committed, and our President is committed to ensuring that that happens. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso for her statement, and now give the floor to Her Excellency Gada Wali, Minister of Social Solidarity of the Arab Republic of Egypt and Chair of the Council of Arab Ministers of Social Affairs, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, sir. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt participates in this important international event, and I was honored to preside over the 38th session of the Arab Council of Ministers of Social Affairs, the Ministerial Arab Mechanism on People with Disabilities. It's our pleasure to participate in this important annual event to exchange information and expertise to enhance the life of this important strata of society. It's a pleasure to share with you some of the achievements of Egypt in this field, in line with our effort to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, which was sponsored and closely followed by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We will present those achievements to you, and we are happy to share our expertise with our partners. We have enacted the Egyptian law on the rights of people with disability in 2018. All ministries started the implementation of this law already. The government provides cash support to people with disability who cannot work in the amount of 4.2 billion pounds. The government has financed 150 different projects to develop the mobile phone technology and computers to assist people with disability. We have provided transportation service at low cost to people with disability. The reduction goes between 75% and 98%. We have rehabilitated a number of monumental sites in Egypt, known internationally for people with disability, along the line of the Egyptian initiative of Tourism for All, to attract visitors from all over the world, especially people with disability. We've also employed a number of people from this important strata in different tourism fields. We've also issued the standardized sign dictionary. We have conducted a survey for more than 4 million people between 2017 and 2018 to detect early on any disability. we have started the design of a database where all people with disability will be registered to decide on the nature and characteristics of disability. We have various specificities in the Arab region, and we are indeed facing different hardships and challenges, be it Egypt or the Arab countries, from the horrific terrorism operations or armed conflicts, in addition to the Israeli practices and other matters that affected life of people with disability. Therefore, it was hard to put appropriate target plans that are capable of being implemented on the ground. How can the Arab region implement the slogan of this conference, include in ensuring inclusion in a changing world? Despite all those hardships and obstacles, we have a strong will to cooperate and make great effort in cooperation with civil society organizations, the private sector, the UN partners, and other groups to enhance the life of people with disability and ensure a better life. This comes in our attempt to ensure social justice and implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the implementation of the 2030 agenda. We are happy to announce the Valletta Political Declaration on the 25th of April 2018 on the Arab-European cooperation. We look forward to implementing this declaration along with other initiatives to institutionalize this Arab international cooperation.
We thank the distinguished representative of Egypt for her statement, and now give the floor to Mr. Jean-Christine Kosto, Deputy Minister of Culture of Norway, speaking on behalf of Group of Friends on Education and Lifelong Learning from Argentina, Czech Republic, Kenya, Japan, and Norway. You have the floor, sir.
Chair, on behalf of Norway, in March I had the honor of heading the Norwegian delegation to our initial dialogue meeting with the CRPD committee. The dialogue was very fruitful for us. All concerns and recommendations from the committee are now being considered by the government. The government's platform states that in Norway, everyone should have equal opportunities and freedom to make their own choices. The government will work for equality and equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of gender, age, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Everybody in Norway shall have opportunities for personal development, participation, and self-realization on an equal basis. Norway wants to be a country where everyone has the opportunity to succeed regardless of their background. Chair, this winter the government launched a strategy for the equality of persons with disabilities to take effect from 2020 to 2030. The strategy, called A Society for All, will be followed up by an action plan to be launched later this year. We are also working on our fourth action plan for universal design. The authorities consulted disabled persons' organizations widely when drawing up and implementing plans and measures. Regular meetings are held at ministerial and local level. Involvement of those concerned is very important in order to increase the quality of the decision-making and in taking action. According to reports, there are 800 million persons with various types and degrees of disabilities in developing countries. Many are vulnerable, and their rights to health, education, protection are too often neglected, including in development programs. We are now making sure that the interests of persons with disabilities are an integral part of all our relevant development programs. The Leave No One Behind agenda is at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030 and also guides Norway's efforts for persons with disabilities. Chair, I am pleased to announce that the government strengthens our development efforts for persons with disabilities. Over the next 4 years, 400 million Norwegian kroner will be allocated to programs specifically addressing persons with disabilities. This comes on top of what we already provide. We actively use the new OECD DAC disability marker to better identify and plan our total allocations to relevant projects. We hope the new scheme will make a difference for many people in a difficult situation around the world. Thank you for your attention.
We thank the distinguished representative of Norway for his statement on behalf of Norway. And now give the floor to the European Disability Forum. The distinguished representative, you have the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, colleagues and fellows in the disability movement and in civil society. My name is Yannis Vardakastanis and I represent the European Disability Forum, and I'm a member also of the delegation of the European Economic and Social Committee to the COSP. Our statement today focuses mainly on two very important issues. First, on political participation, on participation in public life. And secondly, on the nothing about us without us, how to make the General Comment number 7 work. It is absolutely crucial that persons with disabilities participate fully and unconditionally in public and political life. Millions of persons with disabilities around the world are faced with legal and other barriers to their political participation. We call on the state parties to go from words to deeds. And when you will be next year in this House, to present practical changes in your legislation that you will make equal recognition before the law reality for millions of persons with disabilities around the world. Democracy should be for all. And if democracy is not for all, inclusion cannot be achieved. And of course, the world is changing. But the question is that world that is changing taking with it all of the population? The answer is, so far, no. Nothing about us without us. Colleagues in the disability movement put it high on the agenda. The CRPD is for emancipation, to free us from discrimination, exclusion, and coercion. It is in our hands. Thank you.
We thank the distinguished representative of the European Disability Forum for his statement. And now give the floor to Mr. Gregory Likaret, Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Protection of the Russian Federation, for his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chair, thank you. The Russian Federation has already organized the work for its federal and regional bodies to implement the recommendations of the committee following the consideration of the first report on the implementation of the convention. We have a plan of measures in place pursuant to which a certain number of decisions and legal initiatives are being taken. And we attach particular importance to the issue of family life and different forms of family life and life in society. The Russian Federation will continue to work to improve the access of persons with disabilities in remote regions and rural areas as part of states' programs to accessible milieu. And this program is to conclude in 2025. Mr. Chair, we will also create a rehabilitation system in order to empower and render independent persons with disabilities. For this reason, my country is developing a network of auxiliary services and services for rehabilitation. This network makes it possible to create the conditions for an independent life for persons with disabilities, with equal opportunities for all. And we are currently instituting a system of social support and assistance and assisted living for persons with disabilities. This is an experiment which will be enshrined by law. We continue to reform our legislation to ensure full respect for the rights of persons with disabilities and to impede discrimination. We're also in the process of ensuring access and accessibility. Federal and regional bodies are responsible for oversight in this regard. The Parliament has implemented a bill which provides for fines in the cases of violations of provisions of relevant disability law. In 2009, we implemented radical amendments to our legislation on labour. We have defined obligations for labour services. They have now obligations to ensure the employment of persons with disabilities and not wait for persons with disabilities to come to the services. Rather, these labour integration services are asked to reach out to them. We've also begun to guarantee support programs to help persons with disabilities to seek work. Pursuant to recommendations of the committee, we have taken other measures to improve legislation, namely in the field of labour and work. And we're looking to guarantee that persons with disabilities have a number of places in the workplace guaranteed for them, and we continue to implement all recommendations of the committee, which are the fruit of the convention's text. Thank you.
We thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Kerstin Gress, Parliamentarian State Secretary and Deputy Minister of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs of Germany, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by saying that Germany remains committed to and moves forward with the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and will continue to focus on its realization over the coming years. This goes for both national implementation and international cooperation. In this latter area, Germany will be taking a step forward with the upcoming adoption of a new inclusion strategy for the field of development cooperation. In the spirit of inclusion, Germany celebrated the 10th anniversary of the entry into force of the Convention by way of a federal law on the 26th of March 2019. In this context, we did not just look back at the milestones of the past decade. Above all, we looked at the challenges we will face in the coming years. The German government will not let up in its efforts to include people with disabilities in the general labor market. For example, we have launched the Hiring Counts initiative to raise awareness among employers who fail to meet their legal obligation to employ persons with significant disabilities. The German government is currently working intensively with all stakeholders to implement the Federal Participation Act, which has already been adopted and contains many improvements for persons with disabilities. The Act provides persons with disabilities with more participation opportunities and more self-determination. Germany also will update its national action plan for the implementation of the Convention, placing a particular focus on the topic of digital transformation and inclusion. Moreover, we will make sure that the digital transformation strategy of Germany's federal government takes into account the concerns of persons with disabilities, and their digital communication with public authorities is accessible. Germany's federal government is also planning to further improve the accessibility of healthcare services and especially of doctors' offices by means of a financial support program. The continuation of an initiative for inclusive social environments is important for promoting social inclusion by bringing together stakeholders from various cities and local districts with the aim of enabling all people to take part in the daily life of their communities. Furthermore, Germany's federal government will work on the protection of persons with disabilities, especially women and girls, from all forms of violence. To this end, there will be a roundtable tasked with drawing up a concept for the protection of persons with disabilities against violence. Ladies and gentlemen, the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is currently reviewing the extent to which Germany has implemented the Convention. Germany's federal government recognizes the importance of this process, as it gives up an opportunity to receive valuable input for our future policies and to have the measures we have taken evaluated by the committee. Thank you for your attention.
We thank the distinguished representative of Germany for her statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Alexia Manambi Nkubi, Deputy Minister for Disability Affairs of Namibia, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Namibia is a nation committed to the rights of all. Mr. President, the 2011 National Population and Housing Census places the number of persons with disabilities at 90,413, which is 4.7% of our total population. The Namibia policy, legislators, and institutional framework is conducive to address the rights of persons with disabilities. The December 4, 2007 ratification of the CRPD and the optional protocol reaffirm our commitment to protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of persons with disabilities with an acute sense of urgency. Hence, Namibia is in the process of reviewing the 1997 National Disability Policy on the National Disability Council Act of 26 of 2004. This is in an effort to meet both its domestic and international obligations through the use of stronger textual language in the domestic institutional policy and legislative framework that will reflect the letter and spirit of the CRPD. Mr. President, Namibia is fully aware that technology, digitalization, and ICT for the empowerment and inclusion of persons with disability are at most importance in a fast-changing world. Government is hard at work to articulate a comprehensive national digital policy and strategy framework that will illuminate the path for judicial operations in Namibia and to keep the current momentum on digitalization. The government will soon engage a host of stakeholders both in the public and public sector to generate a range of products and services that should be prioritized, including in schools for children with disabilities. Social inclusion and the rights on the highest attainable standard of health for persons with disabilities were set as high priorities by the Namibian government. The Ministry of Health and Social Services continue to receive the highest percentage of the national budget, allowing persons with disabilities to have access to free medical health care. There is provision of assistive needs for persons with disabilities such as sunscreen, for people with albinism, orthopedic assistive devices for those with physical disabilities, provision of disability grants and availability of social workers for home visits to support children with disabilities and persons with mental health-related disability, to name but a few. Further to the provision of services and support, Namibia remains fully committed to the inclusion of persons with disabilities in society through participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and political sphere. For example, the Namibian government continues to support Paralympic athletes whom have made the country proud through their outstanding achievements at the Games. The continued efforts to protect and promote the rights of persons with disabilities has not been without challenges, but these are not insurmountable. For instance, stigma and discrimination because of misconceptions around disability remains concern. The lack of human and financial resources, especially in the current drought conditions where a state of emergency was declared by our president, also remains challenging, but efforts are being made to address it. Mr. President, it is our hope that we will continue to benefit from sharing of experience at this platform like this, where we are now, and other networks to ensure the CRPD is implemented in a manner that
we thank the distinguished representative of Namibia for her statement, and now give the floor to Madam Doris Mendoza, Vice Minister of Development and Social Inclusion of Honduras, for her statement. You have the floor, Madam.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, I would like to tell you how my delegation is pleased on your election to lead the 12th Conference of States Parties to this convention. My delegation, alongside other previous speakers, would like to endorse the statement to be made by the group of Friends of Older Persons. In Honduras, the sector of persons with disability had been forgotten historically in our country. There were isolated efforts to do something for them. However, since the first mandate of President Juan Orlando Hernández Alvarado, with his Better Life platform, has focused on the group with inclusion, registration, identification, and work by the state, helping many Hondurans to live with their disabilities. The main lines of our government are the following: review, update, harmonization of national rules in accordance with the Convention and the Optical Protocol, especially in our criminal code for access to information. We've had the first Braille issue of the Constitution, and also the law on transparency and access to information, both allowing a greater participation in our country. With Decree 321 of 2013, the law of Honduran Sign Language was approved to guarantee and fully recognize hearing disabled and visually disabled persons. Public policy works with a comprehensive system for social protection, evaluating needs and capabilities of persons for comprehensive treatment. In education, since 2014, the master plan and infrastructures includes standards for education for persons with disabilities. At higher level education, the Autonomous University in Honduras has a plan for development for physical infrastructures. In 2015, there was approval of the law for protected work for persons with disabilities to impulse their economic independence. And the labor inspectors also have been given instructions to protect persons with disabilities. We work with our program of Jobs Give Better Life. This also includes plus jobs for the employment system for mediation for persons with disabilities. As a country, we recognize that we have a heavy debt with persons with disabilities. We've moved along the path with a high-level policy and civil society working as our main partner. There's also been interest shown to support the work. What is most important is that persons with disabilities in Honduras have the certainty that they're not alone. We want to set a solid base so that nobody is left behind.
I thank the distinguished representative of Honduras for her statement, and now give the floor to His Excellency Krasiastov Mishakiwi, Secretary of State, Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Policy of Poland, for his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Polish disability policy is fully in line with the topics of this year's conference. The government has made a qualitative leap over 4 last years. We have new solutions in the area of family policy, education, employment, and accessibility. We are working on future changes aimed at strengthening framework for inclusion of persons with disabilities in all areas of life. Implementation of such solutions is possible owing to a significant increase of funds. In 2018, the government has allocated a record-breaking $5 billion for disability policy, over $1 billion more than in 2015. This year marks the creation of the Solidarity Fund for the support of persons with disabilities. Broad-based social and work and vocational services are financed by the fund. Next year, the fund will amount to $500 million. Support for persons with disabilities and their families is one of the objectives of the Pro-Life program. Various solutions promoting social integration of persons with disabilities are offered under the program. Also, new forms of psychological, social, and economic support are proposed to their families. Accessibility Plus program is being implemented to increase accessibility of public spaces, products, and services. Access has been facilitated to education, healthcare, and transportation. The draft of the Access Act is close to completion. It will be the legal basis for implementation of the universal accessibility principle by public institutions. Financial support to individual persons with disabilities become more substantial with increased benefits in cash, as well as higher payments to alleviate additional costs resulting from disability. As of last year, persons with significant degree of disability are entitled to health care and rehabilitation or on a priority basis. Our objective is a fundamental change of the lives of persons with disabilities. The strategy for persons with disabilities is just about complete. A comprehensive modern disability policy will guarantee the implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities in line with the Convention, namely to a full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Thank you for your attention.
We thank the distinguished representative of Poland for his statement. And now move on to the last speaker for this morning's session, the distinguished representative of the International Disability and Development Consortium. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, delegates and civil society representatives. I realise I'm keeping you from lunch, so I will try and keep this as brief as possible. The International Disability and Development Consortium is a global alliance of 32 non-governmental organisations, organisations of persons with disabilities, and networks working in more than 100 countries around the world. As IDDC, we promote inclusive development and the full and effective enjoyment of human rights by all persons with disabilities. This is an important time for disability inclusion. After decades of neglect, disability has been established as a core issue within the UN's Sustainable Development Agenda, building on the foundations of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Many of the barriers and the issues remain the same as those debated, discussed and agreed under the auspices of the UN Decade of Persons with Disabilities more than 30 years ago. But there are also new challenges we must rise to meet: the climate crisis and its related humanitarian and migration effects, the opportunities and potential barriers created by technological advances, and the political challenge to multilateralism, each of which has a disability inclusion dimension. The UN Disability Strategy, launched with the leadership of the Secretary-General today, clearly builds on the promise of the SDGs to leave no one behind. The ambition set out in the strategy has the potential to be transformative. We must ensure that we deliver on this potential, that positive new initiatives are adequately resourced, and that we learn lessons about what works and what does not, and share them. IDDC, our members and our partners, can be a force to help drive this progress, and we look forward to supporting the implementation of the UN strategy as well as other key initiatives. Within this context, coordination will be ever more crucial. As IDDC, we are responding to this by increasing collaboration between our members in the countries where we work. Partnerships with organizations of persons with disabilities remain core to our approach. We hugely value our ongoing partnership with the International Disability Alliance and its members, and with organizations of persons with disabilities in the countries where we work. We must all strive to further build and develop these meaningful partnerships if we are going to deliver the commitments set out in Agenda 2030, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the ambition of the UN's Disability Strategy. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the International Disability and Development Consortium for his statement. Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are close to the end of this meeting. Colleagues, this afternoon, we shall move the conference to room number 4, conference room number 4. We shall continue the same agenda, item 5A, in order to hear the remainder of the speakers of the general debate, starting with India, who shall be the first to speak in the afternoon. The list of speakers shall be updated and published online in the UN-enabled website and posted also in the conference room 4 as soon as possible before the start of the afternoon meeting around 2:30. As we stated, we will continue the current agenda item during the general debate in conference room 4, not later than 3 p.m. 3 p.m. precisely, we shall begin. Thanks very much. The meeting is adjourned.